Well, good afternoon. I'm Chris Scherer, Member Communications Director of the Society of Broadcast Engineers and the co-host of this month's episode of the SBE WEBxtra, the SBE chapter of the web. This is a monthly SBE meeting that's usually held on the third Monday of the month. And by watching this webcast, you'll earn 1/2 of an SBE recertification point in category G when you recertify. The SBE is the Association for Broadcast and Multimedia Technology Professionals with about 5,000 members, mostly in the U.S., but also around the world. The host of today's SBE WEBxtra is SBE board member Kirk Harnack, who is also the chair of the SBE Social Networking Committee. How you doing, Kirk?
I'm good, and thank you, Chris. Great to see you. And you mentioned on most shows about the half-point credit that you can get for recertification credit by watching these webcasts. And it's occurred to me, how does one keep track of that? Now, Chris, you and I are at a bit of an advantage because we can go back and look at the shows that we've been on, and obviously we were in attendance. But if you're not on the show, how might an SBE member best keep track of that?
Well, that's kind of the glory of recertification. In fact, you mentioned this, and just let's see if I can do this without giving away personal information. I just got my recertification letter that I'm due later on this year. With that letter came a paper form that lets you track your points on paper if you want to do it that way. On the SBE website, there's actually an Excel file. I know, really high tech, but it works. That you can just type your information into. It'll tally your points and the categories. And it's just a really easy way to keep track of them. I happen to use that one myself. So at the end of the show, and when I go to a chapter meeting, etc., I open the file and I just make a note of it. That is one of the keys to recertification. And some people seem to let that fall to the wayside, it seems, and not keep track when things happen. Unfortunately, that's really the best way to do it, as opposed to waiting 5 years and then trying to scratch your brain about, I think I went to a transmitter school and I kind of remember going to some conference, but so unfortunately, the onus is on you, the user.
Well, I have a method.
Best to keep track as you go.
I have a method. Take your belt right here. Take a knife. You can get these usually from different broadcast vendors. This one says Gentner on it. How about that? and
there's a clap.
Every time you attend one of these, you can just cut a little half a notch in your belt, and that
so
way
you just put a notch in your belt. I see. Hey, whatever works.
That's right. All right, Chris, we have a fantastic guest today. I'm so excited. We've been prepping for this show. We had a pre-show meeting, and I did some prep this morning. Our guest is Martin Theophilus. And if we can go ahead and say hi to Martin real quickly right now before we get to our member update. Martin, welcome into the show. Glad you're here.
Thank you, Carl. I really appreciate the invitation. Appreciate you and Chris including me.
And I'm going to guess you've got a whole bunch of reel-to-reel machines behind you, and we're about to find out some amazing history of magnetic recording, how it got started, incredible innovations from Germany in the 1930s and 1940s, and then where we went on from there. And Martin has got this amazing story to tell. We've got lots of pictures. So you're going to want, if you miss part of this show will be on YouTube later on, and you can watch it then and review some of these amazing machines with us later on. But first, let's get to Chris Scherer with a member update. Chris?
Here's your member update for August 17, 2020. The annual SBE election of officers and half the directors for the board of directors began July 17 and runs through August 19. If you haven't voted yet, there are 2 days left. There is one candidate for each officer position and 9 candidates for the 6 available director seats. Each SBE member received a unique link to the ballot via email. If you opted out of electronic voting, you don't have an email address on file, or the email test message we sent in advance had a problem, you'll receive a ballot through the mail, which you need to turn around ASAP and get it back to the SBE National Office. Please be sure to vote, whether it's online or by paper. These volunteers deserve your consideration. And normally at this time, the SBE National staff and board would be preparing to gather at the annual SBE National meeting, which was scheduled to be held in Syracuse in September with the SBE 22 Broadcast and Technology Expo. The Expo has been canceled this year, so the SBE events will be held online instead. The annual membership meeting and SBE Awards banquet proceedings will be combined into an online membership meeting and awards presentation on September 23rd. Watch the SBE website, social media, and email newsletters for all the details. It'll be that evening on the 23rd. The August issue of the Signal has already been mailed, and of course it went out just before the change was made to the the in-person meeting instead of it being online. So you can kind of ignore a lot of that information, unfortunately. So like I said, watch the website, social media, and email newsletters. There are 2 webinars by SBE on the calendar, and of course, many more are always on the way. On August 27, we present FM broadcast antenna and combining systems. Alex Persevich, president of JamPro Antennas, will discuss broadband antennas, the benefits of broadband for single and multiple operators, as well as combining systems, how they work, and which types to use and when. And on September 10, you can view AOIP Module 7, Interconnecting AOIP Systems, Making It All Work Together. Shane Toven, senior broadcast engineer with KLove and Air One Broadcast Networks, will discuss best practices for AOIP networking, as well as techniques for interconnecting different AOIP technologies using AES 67. For these webinars and all the info on webinars by SBE, go to sbe.org/webinars. On the certification side, the current SBE local chapter exam window ends today. The next local exam opportunity is the week of November 6. Submit your application by September 21 for that one. The schedule of exams for 2021 is also posted on the SBE website. If a local chapter exam is not convenient for you, private proctoring is available. Contact the SBE National Office for details. And for more information on SBE certification, it's all available online at sbe.org/certification. And that is your SBE member update for August 17, 2020. Kirk?
Thank you so much, Chris. Good update. And I'm looking forward to a couple of those webinars myself, especially Alex Perkovich and the FM antenna and combining. That's always been a black art to me. And so I'm excited to get an explanation of all that. All right. Well, we're ready to jump right into our topic for today. And that is Martin Theophilus with the Museum of Magnetic Sound Recording in Texas. And so, Martin, welcome in. Glad you're here. And it looks like you're right in the thick of it. You're sitting in front of a whole bunch of recorders. When our producer takes the wide shot, we can see it all.
Thank you. Yes, I do. Yes. I started out doing recording with recorders and then went digital. And sometime around 97, I started looking into the history of them and decided there was no website for them. So I started that. And then my wife gave me a gift of a Edison cylinder player, and I thought, ooh, eBay, and I started looking for my old recorders, and suddenly we had 240 of these guys.
Oh my goodness! Suddenly, that's suddenly.
Right. Well, over about 10 years, right? And it was initially it was just to recoup the things that I'd used over the years, and just to have them around me, and then started coming across things that were really unique, and I was looking for things like maybe the company first started using as a recorder, and then later some of the later things they did. And then we ended up with a couple of really significant things. One was a Roberts reversible recorder stereo that you flipped the head cover, and it was a black and white video recorder. And it came out right when the moon landing came, and that was their ad. If you had one of these, you could. So I thought, well, that's significant. And then all of a sudden this Ampex 200 came by on eBay. And people passed it by, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to Salinas, California, and get that guy. And at that point, the collection to me really became significant because it had there was only 213 of those built. It was the first Ampex built. It had belonged to the producer Leo DeGargulka, who had demos from the original Grateful Dead when they were called something like the Neighborhood Watch or something. Wow. And then he went on to master Tequila. And what got really interesting is it had also done demos for a band we worked with, which was Sleep at the Wheel. We had a good friend, Floyd Domino, who played for Sleep at the Wheel. And so sometime around 2011, 12, I felt like it needed to be preserved. And then I also felt like, what is my wife going to do if something happens to me with all these? So we started looking around, and we wanted to create a nonprofit public permanent museum. Do you want me to go down this road for a second?
Yeah, sure. Please do. And by the way, Will, what city is your museum in?
We're in actually Cedar Creek. We're just east of the Austin airport.
East of
15
Austin.
miles
Okay.
out of
All right.
Austin. Austin was where we were concentrating.
Sure. Give us this
almost-
quick overview of the museum, and then we'll jump into the history and education. Go ahead. Talk about it.
Okay. So we formed a board, formed a nonprofit, started looking around. All of a sudden, the city of Austin had a old power plant they were decommissioning, and they had a large building right on the Colorado River that they didn't know what in the world to do with. And they said the public should just input on what we should do. And we won. We won what should be done with this fabulous 2-story building. Found out that several companies had done super architectural work on it. We tried to quickly get with a friend we had at UT in the architecture department to do something. He says too late. All the students were already scheduled. But that attracted the attention of the assistant director and now director, Margaret Koch of the Bob Bullock Texas State History Museum. And she wanted to support us. And she said, right now we have like 30 feet in the Museum of Texas Music that's old 50s records. And we'd like to expand that. We've got an oil can theater about the oil business. And then she showed us this 3,000 square foot room on the 3rd floor they had, and I salivated. And they got to look into it, and I said, if more of your stuff was tied to famous people, we'd probably be interested. And they ended up taking the Ampex last October, and it is on display on the 3rd floor by itself, lonely. And of course, the COVID is not going to let anybody around it now. But that's what we found is we pursued this nonprofit for 5 years, and people felt like if it was memorabilia about some famous artist, they were interested in going for it, and we're interested in it. But if it was just technology, they didn't see that it would be an attraction. The Bullock, in fact, finally decided to do the history of the Austin city limits. So the theater now has that with a lot of memorabilia, and that's one reason our recorder is up there, because of Asleep at a Wheel has a thing. So it's really disappointing to not be able to get it preserved.
So we're going to start, because if we don't start now, we're not going to get through them.
Right.
We've got a bunch of pictures to show, and a lot of these are close-ups. And behind every single picture, there is a story, either a technical story or a personality story or a usage story. So again, we don't have time for a long treatise on each one, but we're going to give you a taste of each one and stop for a bit more of a story on the ones that Martin feels are more important to tell a story about. So Martin, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask our producer Suncast to just start right in with the first picture in the album, and you just tell us what you would tell me if I was touring your studio, your museum.
Okay, that's the first capture of audio that's known, and it was done using a cylinder with soot from the fireplace, and it was reacting with a little pin that would go to the vibrations of sound. They couldn't play it back. There's nothing they could do with it. In the late 1990s, it was computerized, and it was found it was a flute tuning up for an orchestra presentation in France.
But this was in 1857, and this was in France.
1857, the very first recording, right?
Oh, wow.
So it seems a little odd that someone would develop away something but not consider how to play it back.
Interesting you would say that. When Bing Crosby supported the Ampex 200 development, the engineers had a real flaw in the record circuit when they took it in to demonstrate it. And they had a group of engineers, audio engineers from around the country. And they had some tapes already from Bing Crosby. So they played that, and everybody went, oh, wow, and left. And the engineers went, they didn't ask us to record. Thank God. Nobody said anything.
Gosh. All right, let's look at the next one here. What is this?
Okay. This is from Paulson. This is, I may have to double look and see. I've got a cheat sheet here. Well, this is from Sweden. This was the first probably serious wire recorder. And this was probably the first thing that they decided that there could be magnetized wire, that you could actually capture those sound vibrations, turn them into a magnetic signal. And that was the first thing they were recording. He couldn't do much. The crazy thing in everything, whether it be from Edison and his cylinder players and this machine, it was built primarily to be a telephone answering machine. That's what their focus was. They never thought about music, never thought about documentation. It was an answering machine. That's all they wanted.
Wow, how backwards that seems, but okay. Let's look at the next one. What's next?
All right. Okay, that was taken a little bit further by Paulson. That is now actually a wire recorder. That was the first wire recorder ever produced. And again, it was crazy because they not only had that thin wire, the British came up with a still recorder, which actually used quarter-inch wire, maybe an 1/8 inch, and it was running like at 200 miles an hour. I think there's probably a better comment for that. And their problem was if it broke, I mean, they said the room just was crazy because you could be decapitated. And the other problem with wire is that you break it. The only way you can fix that is either solder it or you can tie it in a knot. And of course, then as it goes by the head, it's going to go bing, bing, bing. So that was the downside of wire. Although wire during World War II became a very significant part. I'm not sure if we've got Cameras's picture. If we do, I'll tell you more about him in just a second.
Okay.
So this telegraph phone, is this sort of the first example of what we get to know now as an open reel type design as opposed to a drum?
I suppose it would be reel to reel. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, really.
Yeah. Good point, Chris. Yeah. All right, next.
Okay, Flumer was the one that suddenly decided maybe wire might not be the best thing. And he was, of all things, a cigarette paper manufacturer. And he thought if he could sprinkle magnetic bits on cigarette paper and cut it in long lengths, that they would have a better way to do the recording. And he could see that the magnetic bits were actually adjusting to the sound as he played it back. But he really didn't have anything to do with it. So he didn't really license it. I think he just gave it away to AEG in Germany, and they developed it, and then that's became the first plastic back, or I forget, it wasn't initially plastic. They did a more serious paperback thing and then went into plastic.
I will say that it was popular to smoke cigarettes in recording studios for many decades.
Oh, I know.
Not now, but it was.
Right. I know. I get some machines that have definitely been there.
What's this picture with the big reels right here?
That's the British still, or Marconi still, the bladder phone. This is the one that has the large wire. And they used it, I think they say, what did they say? 1,000 milliliters, 32 minutes, weighed 25 pounds. I just can't believe the different directions they went on stuff, because I've seen a picture of that operating on video, and it was amazing. So that was just the next iteration of wire recording.
I'm sure everything they tried, they thought they were getting better each time.
I know. Well, they were. Yeah, the fidelity got better. Got better.
What's next?
Okay, this is Germany finally producing the first real reel-to-reel tape recorder. Interesting comment, those reel sizes, 7-inch, quarter-inch depth, are based on that's what film was using, so why not use the same kind of reel? And that was developed in 1935, brought to the United States to an audio show, and the audio was just horrible. There was no high end to it or anything. Nobody was interested. So they took it back, and they were messing around with a machine that they couldn't understand why it suddenly got better. It had some real problems. So they brought it on a workbench, and they found out that it was getting AC biasing injected, and it was making it a full range. There was nothing like it. It said it was the first time the signal coming in was exactly as the signal being played back. And so they put in a third head actually on the other side of the heads, and that brought out the full fidelity. And that's what Hitler started using during the World War II. One, he used it to play back himself in different parts of Germany, so nobody would know where he was. But I think what fascinated the American soldiers, what they kept hearing these orchestras playing all the time, and they thought, God, Hitler was keeping these orchestras awake all night, but it was these recordings, and people just couldn't believe the fidelity.
My goodness. Wow. Let's move on to the next one then. Interesting, sure. That AC, but so is that where bias first getting started using in recording?
Yes.
By an accidental discovery?
An accidental discovery, exactly.
Makes sense. All right, this next picture, this is cool. Here's an advertisement. Tell us what this is.
Okay, so this is Ampex. Ampex was making radar motors during World War II, and when the war was over, the Army sent Signal Corps people into Germany to look at the different technologies that had been developed. And the recorder was one of the main things. And Robert Jack Mullen was going down a road, getting ready to come back, when a British engineer said, you need to go down to this radio station and hear these machines. And so he did. And that was one of the magnetophones with the high fidelity, because they'd never seen one. He was able to get 2 of them and take them apart and ship them back to himself, along with 50 rolls of tape. the Germans had. Subsequently, they gave a show to something, I forget, it was not really consumer electronics, probably something like the early AES. And one of Bing Crosby's people was there. Well, Bing Crosby's problem, and I didn't go into acoustic, the difference in acoustic and magnetic, but Bing Crosby's problem was he was not wanting to be in the studio all the time. Everything had to be live. And when they started cutting his shows on lacquer, on records, if there was a mistake or problem, they either started over or they had to copy it. And if you copy a record acoustically, it's going to degrade tremendously through the thing. So when they heard the tape and the fact that maybe Bing Crosby could go play golf instead of being there all the time, that he was interested in it. So they did the demonstration I mentioned where it didn't actually record, but they did fix that. And so he bought 20 machines, paid 60%, $50,000 to have 20 machines built for ABC for his show. 2 of those went to Jack Mullen, but nobody had tape. So Jack was using that old German tape and splicing each show. And of course the tape would be shipped to California. And so he had to keep cobbling together all these tapes. And finally 3M came to the rescue and came out with a serious tape based on the German technology.
I think in the next slide or two, I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, in the next slide or two, we've got a picture from one of the networks. Let's take a look at what's next there,
okay.
Suncast.
All right.
Okay, well, there's this picture. Mm-hmm.
That's our machine. And interesting, in the background to the left is the prototypes of MagnaCord that were donated to us. Those are the first MagnaCords that were built and given to the John Boyer's son. And then straight behind you is one of the last, well, not one of the last, is one of Revox's, one of Willie Studer's designs, which I absolutely love because it tied a tuner, an amplifier, and a recorder all together like that. And ICO did the same thing on the top right. But this is basically the Ampex 200, 240 pounds, barely fits in the back of Murano. There's stories of, well, there's holes on the sides where there's 2 handles on each side. And there's stories of record companies in New York carrying this up 3 flights of stairs for on-location recording. And I had to laugh. This interesting came out initially with a B-roll, a B-side, which meant the tape was not facing the heads. It was running in reverse. And then they fixed that real quick and came out with a new version. But there was only 200. Mm-hmm. There's only 213. Sorry. That's
right. You said there's 213 of these built. That's all. And you've got one. Look at the Editol block on the front of that. We got a picture of that, an advertisement coming up with that. Let's see the next slide here.
One other thing real quick, that little round box on the right is actually made by Lyric, and it was the first tape counter.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a tape counter with a switch with a reset on it. Incredibly heavy duty, but I just put that on there because that was just a neat piece of
I hate to drop that on my foot. Here's a recording studio. Yeah.
Okay. That's the Ampex 200s in the back of Capitol Records. The initial part of that initial 20 went to Capitol Records, and our number 33 went to Capitol Records and then went to Golden State Recording where Leo DeGargulco was. Leo DeGargulco was a great producer and collector recorders, and he had a collection of Stevens and 3M. I think he may have had a couple of German machines. He passed away and they put him in storage, and his wife was friends with the mother of an engineer who put our recorder on eBay. And I went out to get it, and he had probably 20 high-end recorders, probably worth several $100,000. He bought it for $10,000 and was reselling it piece by piece, and we were lucky.
My goodness. Let's see the next one. Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one I was thinking of. Tell me what's going on here.
Okay, this was Ampex setting up duplication. That was a big thing. They started doing duplicate, and the little, you could see a crank in front of the head cover. That's one of the original 200s. But basically, they set them up there as a listening room and also for broadcast, because like it says there, ABC was done in 18 hours a day. They were running. And they were mailing tape still at that point, of course, to the West Coast from New York. If I could digress for a second on a personal story. Please do. The reason I got into this was I was helping a musician develop their music, and that was one of the reasons I started collecting these and had a studio, was I was trying to help them with their work. And I went with them to a studio in San Angelo, Accurate Sound Company, run by Ron Newdall. And he had just had the #1 hit, Last Kiss with the Cavaliers. And I knew that's what I needed to do. I could just go out and make #1 hits, and that, of course, never happened. But Ron went out to Ampex, bought up a lot of the old Ampex, and made them into high-speed duplication machines and serviced South America and all kinds of things. But it's interesting. He's an interesting guy, still going strong, but decided solar is the place to be now.
We're going to digress from it ourselves and do a little bit of education for those folks who maybe are a little bit younger than me, who may not know much about how tracks are laid down on real machines. So I believe our next few slides have some education about that. Let's take a look at these track format pictures.
Okay. Yeah.
Tell me what we have here.
Okay, you're basically showing on the left, you've got a supply reel. On the right, you've got a take-up reel. It's running from left to right. The tape is passing between where it says PPI, a pressure roller, and a cap stand, which has C on it. And it's going to pass by an erase head to clean the tape, so it has no material on it when it goes to record head. And then it'll go to a play head. And the play head sometimes can be used to monitor that recording it's coming through, or it may be turned off, or it may be used, which I could show you in a second, to come back and do like sound on sound or sound over sound.
Yeah. And so the brown bar near the bottom of the slide is not just a graphic element. It's showing you that in this case, this is a full track recorder. So this is a mono recorder recording across the entire width of the tape. Let's look at the next slide, and we'll see some different ways to get more. I'm sorry, not that slide. I accidentally put that in the wrong place.
Right.
There we go. So here's a quarter track stereo one. So how does this work?
Okay. So the 4 tracks are really, and people think that you're recording on the front and back of the tape, and you're not. They're just interspersing the tracks. So you can see 1 and 3 would be your first left and right stereo when you made the first pass, and then 2 and 4 would be your other stereo going back the other way. And if you had a recorder that would reverse, which a lot of them did, you could then keep it going forever if you wanted to, if it kept bouncing back and forth.
Now,
all right.
Now, quarter track stereo is really more of a consumer or end product, because in a recording studio, you wouldn't flip the tape around and go the other way. That was to get twice as much audio on the tape for home use. And this was really never a broadcast standard. This was really a home use standard, right? Correct.
Right. So if you were just using half of this tape, channel 1, channel 2, that would be how the tape would be mastered for record production.
In fact, our next picture here, let's go to the next one, describes just further what you actually just said. You don't record on both sides of the tape, front and back. You flip it physically and run it the other direction, and you get you automatically get the other 2 sides. So let's look at the next slide, and we'll see now this is how it's used in recording studios, right? Tell us about this.
Right, and this is what really had got me into doing the recording, because people could do multi-track. I think it was 78 when we finally got our first 4-track machine that would run all one direction, and we were doing albums all over the state, in Houston, Dallas, El Paso, and that. And basically being able to lay down usually you'd have to start with a rhythm track with the drums or something, and then you could add a guitar, then you could add a lead vocal, then you could add harmony. And you could also take, in some of the machines, you could take those first 3 tracks and bounce them to that 4th track and mix them to that 4th track, and suddenly you had 3 more tracks opened up that you could use.
Right, they had to do that. Yeah, right. Okay. That was I'm sure an early well before we had any kind of digital recorders, or certainly hard drive based recorders. That's what they had to do to free up more tracks to record more stuff. Is let's go ahead and pre-mix these down. Now we're going to lose the individual tracks when we do that. We're going to have to deal with the mix that we make ourselves. We got a few pictures that have reel-to-reels at broadcast facilities now. Let's do a little series on broadcast. So let's see what's next.
Okay.
KVLF.
That is real funny. I had a friend. This is going to be a real quick story, but I had a friend in grade school that was moving to New Mexico, and my sister Peggy's boyfriend John King said, "Once you get your ham license, you can talk to each other." So we did, and he also was the engineer for that radio station. And in high school, one of my good friends, David Forsheimer, became a DJ as a high school DJ, and he became Bob Young, if you've ever heard of him, he had all kinds of accolades all over the country. He was one of the top DJ and radio programmers. Anyway, because of them, I started hanging out at the radio station a lot and got involved in their recording. I loved their recording, and that's actually what helped me get started. I then started helping the high school band do their recordings, and then I went through college doing recordings. I majored in trumpet, but I was always very suspicious that it was because I had the recorders and I brought and recorded all their concerts as opposed to what my playing was. I'm surprised I even graduated with that. But anyway, so
it's like the lead singer is only in the band because he owned the PA.
Right, right, exactly. But
so this
Gene
is
Hendricks,
a pretty, yeah, go ahead. Gene
Hendricks was a state representative and really built a good radio station, but they only had one of those Magnacords back when I went out. But I would go run and get records, and I would pull stuff off the teletype and change reels, and then all of a sudden they went to automation, which was cool. But I saw a picture of their control room shortly after that, and from the Magnacords they went to Pioneer 707s. The RT707, the one that looks almost like that, but it's a real consumer unit. I was surprised.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, now
on this picture, what amazed me on this picture, by the way, is if that phone rings in the upper right-hand corner, there is no missing it. Look at the
bell. Right. Ding, 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 ding. That went off when the teletype went off. And sometimes,
okay.
And you'd be live too. So.
Oh no.
I'm going to mention in a minute Roberts, and I've got to comment on something. Robert Metzner, in that picture, that huge turntable, that's how Robert Metzner got in the business. He was selling transcription turntables to radio stations, but more to movie houses and square dance locations. He said most of our business was being sold around the country to square dance places. But he was doing repairs of turntables, and that's how he found Akai. Was they were making high-end motors. And I can tell you more about that if we have a chance.
Next picture is a bit more cramped radio studio. There's a lot of stuff in here. What's going on?
That is my original studio. That is my first setup. I built, custom built that control panels in the top, mainly to give me pan in that. The one in the bottom that the man sitting beside was called a portable console. My mother helped me build. Then we realized once we tried to get out the door once, that it was not going to be a portable console. It's all wood, it's heavy to speak. But that guy's name, I think, is Parr, and he would do a weekly radio show, seeing a cigarette there, smoking in studios. He would come in and do a weekly radio do a shoe every week. And we did on remote recordings and that, but we had several Sonys. And I tried to buy some Sony equipment. This was an interesting story. And I wrote to Fred Stashunsky, whose name I'd gotten hold of. Well, Fred turned out to be the vice president of the Sony Superscope movie stuff. And they had taken on the Sony thing, and he said, well, you don't have a distributor right where you are, but we'll set you up with one from Lubbock, which was Balco Sound. And suddenly in Alpine at the college, I was a distributor for Altec, Ampex, and Sony. And all the stuff I bought, I think sales to me personally with the discount was about 3 times more than anything else I sold to the public. But anyway.
Wow. So next we have a picture from a recording studio in Austin. Let's take a look at that. Austin Custom Records.
Austin Custom Records. When I started doing recording of the college, I was producing a record, and Austin Custom Records did our final mastering. And I had the TIAC 3340 at that time and could do 4-track recording. He said, well, you do recordings around the state. So I started doing colleges, churches, producing albums. And finally he said, would you come be our chief engineer? And so I did that for a while. I probably hadn't mentioned in any of this that during a lot of this, my recording was done in the evenings and on weekends. Otherwise, I was working for the state of Texas as a Child Protective Service investigator and trainer.
Wow.
So it was,
wow.
Yeah, I know. So this was a part-time job.
I noticed what we have in the picture here. We have a 2-track recorder sitting on top of the 8-track recorder, and then we have a 4-track over on the left. Am I looking at that right?
Yeah. Yep. And we have all of those. The top one is actually an Ampex ATR 700, which was built by TIAC for Ampex when they lost their, well, Ampex at some point decided to retool, and during the retooling, they didn't put out a product. And by the time they got through doing that, Atari, Sony, MCI, and others had pretty well blown them out of the saddle, and they ended up subcontracting their machines to be built in Japan by TIAC. So
now, Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, so that TIAC on top, or Ampex on top, it actually came out in a TIAC version as well, identical. And the one below it was the first time I worked 8-track. I have one of those sitting beside me in the studio here, and I also had the 4-track on the left, which was when TIAC first came out. They had a TCA 41, and it was a 4-track, so that you could listen to quadraphonic tapes. That was their plan. And suddenly musicians were cross-wiring the heads so that they could do sound on sound and sound with sound and multi-track. And so the Ampex changed it, came out with the next version, put switches on the top of the head so they could switch and sync all the recordings. So if you synced, you could actually play back, you could record a track and record it and play it back on a playback head, but you could also record it and play it back on the record head, which kept it in sync with the next track, so you could do multi-track. It was amazing.
I was wondering, and it's amazing in today's digital age. Well, with everybody doing the COVID stay-at-home thing, musicians have tried recording together on the internet. Can't really be done very well. There's that time of flight, over the internet, plus all the digital packing and unpacking. So it's not so possible. Hey, we're in 1980 here on this picture. We're gonna go then to a little bit farther back. I wanted to include this picture of the assembly line at Magnacord.
Robert.
Look at this.
Oh, at Magnacord. Right. Those were incredible. There is a movie on our website of them when they made the only professional wire recorder called the Super Duper, the SD, which is really funny, and found out there really wasn't a market for that. Wire was coming to an end, but they didn't know what else to do. They'd come together after World War II, which a lot of the people that build recorders did. And then they suddenly went, ooh, we need to move to recorders. And they decided their niche was trying to provide places like Alpine, Texas. It couldn't afford Ampex because Magnacord was about a third of the price for the Ampex you would put into studio at that time. But good people. But yeah, they were the only one of the few that actually got to see their assembly line. I did just recently find a movie and put it on our website of Ampex's assembly. And they were talking about all the men that had managed the company. And then they show their room where they're putting together the recording heads, and it's all women. They said, well, it had to be women because it's detail work.
Wow. Well, to me, this picture looks like the photographer said, hey, I'm going to take a picture. Everybody look busy. So,
right. Exactly. Yeah.
Now you several times, Martin, you've introduced, and by the way, we are talking to Martin Theophilus with the Museum of Magnetic Sound Recording in Cedar Creek, Texas, just east of Austin. So thanks for joining us on the show here. We got plenty more pictures to go. In fact, Martin, I want to look at this next one here. You've mentioned about Roberts, and I had never heard of Roberts. So tell us about, here's an ad, I believe, for a Roberts 990.
Right. Robert Metzger, as I said, was selling transcription turntables. He saw this motor in the repair out from Akai, and he got fascinated by it, asked if he could have the rights to build them in America. And finally they got talking. He flew to Japan, and they decided they were going to go into recorders. So he sent them an Ampex 600, and it came back to them, and it looked just like an Ampex 600, but it had the guts of nothing. And so he said, I tell you what, if you will let me work with you, I will help you build something that would be a cheap, inexpensive would be a better word, competitor to Ampex. And they started doing that, and he got them to agree to give him the North American franchise until 1971. So Akai could sell their machines anywhere in the world but North America, and Robert Metzger hung on to it for that. And I talked to him about these pictures. I said, because he had all kinds of famous people in the pictures, and he said, well, one of our employees had a good friend in a marketing entertainment company, and they just started doing it. He said, my very first one was Liberace, of all things. But he was a fascinating guy. He and his son had patented a technique of putting iron rods under the city of Los Angeles and putting magnets underneath cars so that they could self-control. You could drive yourself into work. And this was 1947. And then he patented an electric gas car in 1960 something, finished it in 75, drove it to Detroit and presented it to the automakers, and they turned it down because gas was so cheap. And it's in the Peterson Museum. But he had a patent on the hybrid car, electric gas. And when it expires, within a year, Prius had patented their new stuff. But he didn't care. He was fine. The recording part was a minor part. When I was at my junior senior prom, they were recording the music on Roberts, and that's the first time I saw them. And I asked them for a copy of their tape. And when I got the tape, their lead singer hadn't heard it, so he came over, and that's what started me recording. But they built all kinds of things. They built a 8-track industrial data recorder. That's another little interesting aside. If you look at tape recorders during the years, 50% of those guys were built for industrial data collection, military. Only 50% was built for entertainment, radio stations, and that kind of thing. I didn't know that until I got into it.
I think we have a second Roberts picture here. If we can take a look at that.
Okay.
Is that a Roberts?
That is a Akai on top and a Roberts on the bottom, or vice versa. I think yeah. They turned them out exactly the same.
There's no copyright infringement there.
Well, Robert Metzger built them, and Akai could use his designs and sell in the rest of the world as long as they sent. What they would do is Akai would send him their recorders like that. He would rebrand them. He would test them. That's what part of that testing was. Oh, that was Magnacord. Roberts also had testing. They would test them before they went out, but they just rebrand them. It's exactly the same. I have multiple examples of this on our website of the same recorders. He patented one of the things he was most proud of when we were in his house was he patented a little dial at the top of one of the recorders that you could set, and it would change and reverse and go back, and it would replay wherever you wanted it to replay. And he was really proud of that. I think the funniest thing to me is I really thought a lot of them because they were affordable. If you look in any of the catalogs back in the 50s, 60s, Roberts was really affordable. And that wasn't the most significant part of his life, which was a surprise. I got to tell you one real quick. His son was a psychiatrist, and it's through him that I got the interview. His son was a psychiatrist, and I contacted him. And I'd just seen in Time magazine that there was a differentiation in the psychiatric society. Are people hoarding or are they collecting? So I asked him, I said, so what do you think? He said, no, you're very specific in what you're getting. So you're a collector. And, but he said, when I left for college, he said, my family was living in a really small townhouse outside of Los Angeles. And during the time he was gone, the U.S. government came out with a $5 billion proposal for educational equipment for schools and universities. And Robert Metzger's first company was Caliphone. And if you've been in any recording thing in any kind of college or university or high school, they have Caliphone from left to right, record players and recorders and language labs. And Rheem, the air conditioner company, bought Robert Metzger out because they wanted part of that $5 billion. And they hired Robert as an executive in the company until I think they pretty well ran down when Akai came back and took over the market for the world in 71, 72. But interesting. And anyway, then he was living in Beverly Hills when his son came home from college.
So those of us in who have been in radio for a while, and one of my first exposures to anything in radio was at a 250 watt FM station in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I watched a man editing promos together. And so let's take a look at he was using this Editol, and as simple a thing as this may be, it was absolutely critical to what we did in radio with reel-to-reel machines. And so I think this little device, as diminutive as it was actually very precisely designed and manufactured. And Martin, tell us about the importance of this little block.
Yeah, I think, as you said, I think a lot of programmers and radio and recording studios live and died by the.
Did we lose Martin? Okay, we'll see if we can get him back. Chris, why don't you talk about this for a second? I'll make a quick contact with Martin.
Absolutely. Well, as you said, I think all of us, if you use reel-to-reels in any capacity, all of us definitely had to cut our teeth, pun intended, using the Editol block. The key, of course, was also having a good stock of razor blades that were demagnetized. I don't know if anybody's ever made an edit with a blade that has any magnetism to it. You'll get a little bit of a thump over the edit when you make that. So I recall several times taking a blade and running it over the demagnetizer before I started a session just to ensure I had a not only clean from stickiness, but clean from magnetism blade on hand as well. So, do we have, is Martin back with us?
Yeah, and we can go ahead and take a look at the next. Oh, there's Martin. Let's go ahead and move to the next graphic though. About this is also about Editol. Let's see what it is. Oh yeah, well, I wanted to show for those of you who are too young, certainly not me, maybe Chris, but not me. No. That's how an Editol block was applied. You could use double-sided sticky tape to stick it to, or epoxy glue to stick it to your tape machine, or it also had screw down holes, the two beveled holes there next to it. But man, you would find those right near the heads, as near as you could get them, to manually pull that tape out and lay it across that block and make you a splice.
Okay, so I was doing that and running the tape off the side, and my 7-year-old nephew came in and started feeling it, and he said, so I don't understand how you record something on this. I said, no, it's recording tape's magnetic. It's not sticky. How does it capture the voice? Oh, cool, man.
Oh, that's good. That's good. All right, next let's take a look at a much larger recorder.
Okay, that's Stevens. That's a Stevens. That's with hand-built transformers behind each one of those lights. It is incredibly. That guy built them by hand himself. Each one. There's no capstan. It's all digitally controlled. I got out of the blue a call from his brother John. I think Rod. It is John Stevens was the guy. He passed away. And Rod said, I really would like to send you his archive, paperwork and materials and stuff. And he sent us all their stuff and write-ups and the sales. I think you even may have seen a copy of his sales records or something of where all he sold the recorder. He didn't sell that many. He had some great ads of things. But there was one of these in that storage thing when I bought the Ampex 200A in Salinas. And it was incredible. He was pulling out the transformer. They were each in a block. It was just beautifully done. Incredibly well built. There was another company called Premier in New York. It was two guys that built custom recorders like this. One other aside, while I'm talking about Salinas, when I was leaving with the Ampex 200A, there was an Ampex 300 in a portable case, which was the next one Ampex came out with. And I said, man, I'd really like to have that, John. He said, well, you'd have to pay about 4 times what you paid for the 200 because that one's just too rare. And I said, oh, yep, nope. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I closed up the back and he said, oh, damn, Martin, those two have been together their whole life. I'll go ahead and sell it to you for the same price. Whoa, that's an aficionado.
Yeah. Wow.
There you go.
Hey, this next picture, I've got to point out how rugged these Stevens recorders were. Because look, you can even put them down on a railroad track.
Exactly. Yeah, right. And
gosh. Oh my goodness. Next picture here. We're going to look at a couple old recorders and then move into some slightly newer stuff, I think, as we move along. What's this?
Okay.
A Studer. Look at that.
Okay. This recorder, the first recorder that was released in the United States was a brush sound mirror. And it was released in a magazine ad in 1946 and then in the Saturday Evening Post in 1947. And of all things, a dentist in Sweden bought 50 of them for the Swedish market and found out that he couldn't run them because of the difference in cycles, 50 and 60 cycles. He checked around and he found this electrician who basically was an electrician working with amplifiers, had never seen a recorder. And he said, could you change these over to the bias so we can get our money back out of these 50 recorders? And he worked a week evidently or two on it, and he called him and said, this is a piece of junk from the States. He said, I can do a better job. And this was his first recorder. This is Willie Studer's very first recorder. We actually got this from France, but it's called the T26. And it's and then shortly thereafter he changed the name. Well, it was T26 Dynavox, and then it became the Revox Dynavox. And I noticed there on the right, I don't have the tape threaded around the one stop, but that's all right. But it is threaded properly, and it did run opposite ways the way he did his motors, which was unusual. But then he went on, as you know, to do all kinds of things. They have a wonderful we have a video on our website of their museum, and their manager walks you through, and he plays one of these. Willie Studer actually plays one of these, but they walk you through it. And then when Harman Kardon bought out Studer, they did away with the museum. And it's just like Ampex. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to take I'm sorry, we're getting short on time. We got about 5 minutes left is all we got. Let's take a look at the next one. Is an early TIAC. I never envisioned a TIAC looking like this.
It's just like the Ampex 300. Looks exactly like
I was going to say, it looks exactly like the Ampex.
Yeah. Two brothers in Japan got together, decided to put together some reel-to-reels, and this was the first thing that came out. We bought this. This was from Nashville, and it was in its original wooden crate. It's never been used, never been taken out. But that was the first thing. And TIAC contacted me because they did not have a picture of this, and they said, "If you give us a picture, we'll support your museum in some way." And they started running things on their news thing from Europe, Japan, and the States about it. And I said, "Well, would you all be willing to back something like advertising a museum?" He said, "Well, we might." And then they called back. He said, "Well, we looked. You don't really have a big physical location. When you get that, we'll help you." But that kind of died too. Sorry.
Next is a machine that I think I've used this one, this Ampex right here. What is this one?
That's the Ampex 350. In fact, would you like to see that working right now? I can show you that.
Oh, you have one right there. Oh my goodness.
I have one.
I love it. Oh my goodness. That's so romantic about seeing and hearing that. That just really tickles the senses.
Well, good. Everybody wants to hear the recorders going and rewind without a tape lifter.
Yeah,
right.
All right, we got time for just a couple more pictures. This next one here is a good size one, and then we're going to end up on one of Chris's favorites. But let's take a look at this one.
That's one of Studer's later ones, B67. That was pretty well a workhorse throughout everywhere, recording studios, radio stations, everything. I mean, his stuff is just beautiful.
I never worked at a station that could afford one of those. Let's look at our next picture. Chris, is that the one you like?
MCI.
That is the machine I cut my teeth on, the JH110 series. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sadly, this is going to be the last one we can look at. So let's, Chris, both you and Martin, tell us what you like to.
I'll give you my experience with the MCI. Comes because I was in Miami, and the MCIs were basically all out of Fort Lauderdale. So everybody down in South Florida had MCI machines. A few other things here and there, but there was like a wave, and I think it was Control Technology went through and sold brand new JH110s to every station down in the Miami, the Dade and Broward County areas. So every station I walked into had one of those machines.
Right.
So
they were
good machines, but man, those Molex connectors were terrible, and I never want to touch another analog torque board if I can help it.
Mark, what do you know about those?
24 track I ever worked with was an MCI, which was at Cedar Creek Studio in Austin. It's really fun. Well, I appreciate this. This has been a fun walk.
Well, listen, we can't leave without making sure everybody knows how to reach you. The website is the letter R, the number 2 R, as in reel to reel, r2rtx.org. r2rtx.org. That'll take you to the Museum of Magnetic Sound Recording. And Martin is there. There's a contact page. I guess, Martin, you're not open right now due to COVID restrictions, right?
Right. No, but we will give tours later, usually private tours. You need to check out metaxas.com.
Okay. Metaxas.com, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay.
They are building new machines. Very high end, based on Stellavox. They are beautiful. Okay. They are beautiful. There's another company, Balfinger in Germany, that is now building. Atari is no longer going to do anything. I found out. I looked into those for you.
There is another company that's right here in Nashville. I'd be remiss if not at least mentioning, and that is Mara, M-A-R-A machines.
I looked at that.
Mara machines.
Rebuilding stuff, looking beautiful.
Yeah, they really do fine work. Yeah. All right. Martin, so people can go to your website, r2rtx.org. We'll put that in the show notes. You're in Cedar Creek, Texas, east of Austin. I'm sure people could arrange for a private COVID, COVID safe tour.
Right.
and
maybe we'll
come
get
by
into
and
a
see you.
building sometime. Maybe we'll get some interest and we'll get into a building sometime. Maybe the Bullock will get overrun with people looking at the 200.
There are a whole lot of pictures we didn't get to. And you know what I think I should do is in the show notes, I can provide a link to the photo album that I put online, that if we could have gotten all the pictures, we would have. Martin, would that be okay? It's mostly
Sure.
pictures of groups of reel to reel, so we could fit a lot in,
Right.
but we're out of time to do that. So I'll put a link
Yeah.
to my personal photo album where I put these curated pictures in. All right.
I should mention you can download from our site 7 hours of a tour of our collection for $9.
Okay. Okay. Yes. I saw that. You pay a small fee and you get that 48-hour download window, right?
Right. And we're updating that right now, in fact.
All right. Martin, thank you so much
Thank
for being
you,
with
Kurt.
us.
Thank you, Chris.
I appreciate you terrifically. Chris Scherer, it's been great to be with you today. You want to take us out of the show, please?
Well, absolutely. And again, Martin, thank you for being here. It's been quite a walk down memory lane in a few cases, and a new educational experience in some others. And I know the rabbit hole I'm about to go down later this evening, going through the photos that are all over your site, as well as the album Kirk just mentioned. So, but again, everybody who's watching, thanks for watching today's SBE Webxtra. This episode will be available on demand on the SBE YouTube channel. And again, by watching this webcast, you earned 1/2 of an SBE recertification point when you recertify. So keep an eye out for the announcement for our next SBE Webxtra, the chapter of the web, for next month. On behalf of Kirk and Martin, again, thanks to both of you. I'm Chris Scherer, SBE Member Communications Director. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month.